Today we're looking at the most broken combos in the history of Magic the Gathering. Channel plus Fireball. When it comes to broken combos in Magic, there's really only one possible starting point. Magic's first ever combo, and more than 30 years later, still one of its most iconic combos in Channel Fireball. For 2 mana, Channel essentially allows you to convert your life into mana, letting you pay 1 life to make 1 colorless mana. Meanwhile, for red and X, Fireball can throw X damage at your opponent's face. What this means in practice is if we can start with 20 life and 4 mana, we can use 2 mana to cast Channel, pay 19 life to make 19 colorless mana, and toss it all into Fireball alongside our 2 leftover mana, and burn our opponent for the full 20 damage, winning us the game on the spot. Plus remember, this combo came out in Magic's first ever set Alpha, which means that Black Lotus was not just legal at the time, but it was something like $20 rather than hundreds of thousands. Which meant that with a good draw of Black Lotus plus a land plus Channel plus Fireball, this could all be happening literally on turn 1. Not only was Channel Fireball Magic's first iconic combo, but it was also the game's first ever turn 1 win combo, which turned out to be just a wee bit too powerful for Magic, even in the chaotic era of the early 90s. As a result, Wizards restricted Channel. At the time they didn't outright ban cards, giving it the honor of being one of the first ever non-anti cards to be banned in the game's history. Tolarian Academy with Windfall, Stroke of Genius, and Time Spiral. It wouldn't be right to talk about the game's most broken combos without at least shouting out Combo Winter, the infamous period of time between late 1998 and early 1999, right after the release of Urza's Saga, where turn 1 wins were the norm and fast mana from Tolarian Academy broke the game. While a bit less deterministic than many combos, this one was no less devastating. The idea was to flood the board with cheap mana artifacts like Lotus Petal, Mana Vault, and Mox Diamond, which would power up Tolarian Academy, a land that taps to make a blue mana for each artifact you control, which allows it to make an absurd amount of mana. If you want an example of just how busted Tolarian Academy is, look no further than Earthros, the planet land from Edge of Eternities, which is essentially a Tolarian Academy, but it comes into play tapped. You have to spend a mana to activate it, and tap at least 12 power worth of creatures before you turn it on. Tolarian Academy did all that, but just for playing your land drop for the turn. So anyway, you make an absurd amount of mana, and then you cast Time Spiral, which would draw you a new hand in untapped Tolarian Academy, and then you would dump some more artifacts from your hand on the battlefield, which would let Academy make even more mana, and then you do it again. The end goal of this combo was to use a combination of Windfall and Stroke of Genius to force your opponent to draw their entire deck and kill them by milling out. And oh yeah, did I mention that all of this was hopefully happening on turn 1? Thankfully, the combo didn't last too long, with both Tolarian Academy and Windfall swiftly being banned pretty much across formats, while Stroke of Genius was also banned in Legacy and restricted in Vintage just a few months after the cards actually released, which not only helped end Combo Winner, but ended one of the most broken combos that the game had ever seen. Want to try some of these combos yourself? Well, you can snag all the cards you need from our sponsor Card Kingdom over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Illusions of Grandeur with Donate. Not every broken combo needs to literally win the game on turn 1. Rising from the ashes of Combo Winner was another slower but still very powerful combo in Illusions of Grandeur with Donate, which in keeping with deck naming traditions of the era would be called Tricks after the breakfast cereal. Illusions of Grandeur is a pretty funny card. When the enchantment enters, you gain 20 life, but when it leaves the battlefield, you lose 20 life, and thanks to cumulative upkeep, requiring you to pay 2 and then 4 and then 6 and then 8 mana to keep Illusions of Grandeur on the battlefield, Illusions of Grandeur was very good at leaving the battlefield. The idea of the card was basically for it to be temporary life gain, but players pretty quickly realized that the real power of the card was giving it to your opponent, which is where Donate comes in. The idea was you'd play Illusions of Grandeur and gain 20 life, and then use Donate to give your opponent the Illusions of Grandeur, which meant that when the enchantment left the battlefield, it would be your opponent, not not you who lost the 20 life. And since your opponent didn't get to gain 20 life when Illusions of Grandeur entered the battlefield, they would just die as soon as they couldn't play the cumulative upkeep. Backed by a bunch of control spells and ramp, the deck was surprisingly powerful during its era, and we can still see the remnants of its impact today as players use cards like Harmless Offering to donate Demonic Pact to their opponent to force them to lose the game. Counterbalance with Sensei's Divining Top. Normally the most broken combos in Magic win you the game on the spot, but the infamous Counterbalance Sensei's Divining Top combo actually does the opposite. It makes it incredibly hard for your opponent to ever win the game, or really do much of anything at all. Counterbalance is a strange enchantment. It costs 2 mana, and once you get it on the battlefield, whenever your opponent casts a spell, you get to look at the top card of your library, and you can reveal it, and if it has the same mana value as the spell your opponent cast, that spell gets countered. Obviously, by itself, Counterbalance is incredibly inconsistent, since you're basically just hoping to have enough blind luck that the mana value of 2 random cards match. But once you add Sensei's Divining Top to the mix, it becomes a very hard lock. For a single mana, Sensei's Divining Top lets you look at the top 3 cards of your library and put them back in any order. As such, once you get the combo assembled, you typically just leave up all your mana, and whenever your opponent casts a spell, you'd use Top to rearrange the top cards of your library so you could get the right mana value and counter whatever your opponent played. Plus, if you get desperate and your opponent casts a 1 mana value spell, you can always use Top's other ability to put Top on the top of your deck to counter that spell. Toss in a bunch of fetch lands so you can shuffle your library if you don't like the cards on the top of your deck, and a logical split of mana values, and you have a combo that absolutely dominates Legacy. Or at least did, until 2017, when Wizards decided to ban Sensei's Divining Top. Hilariously though, the reason for the banning wasn't so much that the combo was too strong, although as I mentioned before, the blue-white Miracle deck featuring the combo was the best deck in Legacy for a pretty long period of time, but the stated reason for the banning was that Sensei's Divining Top was too slow, with the many top activations it took each turn to keep the combo going, slowing down tournaments to a crawl, which combined with the strength of the deck was enough for Wizards to drop the ban hammer on one of the most unique broken combos in the game's history. Voltaic Key with Time Vault. On paper, the infamous Time Vault Voltaic Key combo is pretty straightforward. Time Vault is a 2-mana artifact that enters tapped, doesn't untap during your untap step, and allows you to skip a turn to untap it, and then taps to let you take an extra turn. Meanwhile, Voltaic Key is a 1-mana artifact that lets you pay 1 to untap an artifact. You can probably see where this is going. You play the Time Vault, use Voltaic Key to untap it, and then tap the Time Vault to take an extra turn, and then during the extra turn, repeat the process, giving you infinite turns, which is pretty absurd in general, and doubly so when the whole combo comes attached to 2 cheap artifacts. The problem is that for years, Wizards couldn't make up their mind as to whether they wanted this combo to exist or not. When Time Vault was first printed, Voltaic Key wasn't even a card, but Wizards still ended up restricting Time Vault since people were using things like Twiddle or Animate Artifact with Instill Energy to combo with it. So in 1996, Wizards eroded the card, based on the idea that it wasn't really supposed to be a combo piece, but Garfield intended players to play Time Vault fairly, I guess. As a result, Wizards changed the text to say that you could skip your turn to untap it and put a time counter on it, and then you could tap it and remove the time counter from it to take the extra turn. Basically, this wording made it so untapping your Time Vault with a Twiddle or whatever wouldn't actually do anything, since you wouldn't get the time counter on it. This worked for about a decade, until 2005, when Wizards printed Flame Fusillade in Ravnica. Well, Flame Fusillade wouldn't let you take infinite turns with Time Vault, it would give you infinite damage with Time Vault, since you could skip your next turn to untap the Time Vault, and then tap it to Fusillade to deal a damage, and then you do this like 20 times, burn your opponent for 20 damage, win the game on the spot. Sure, you'd have to skip your next 20 turns, but that doesn't really matter if the game's already over. Of course, course, once this combo started to be a thing in Legacy, Wizards decided that it simply could not stand. So in 2006, they errata Time Vault again, this time changing the text to make it so Time Vault's untap ability was a triggered ability that only happened once a turn at the beginning of your upkeep, specifically to prevent the infinite damage combo. This lasted about a year or two until 2007, when Wizards, after being pushed by the community, declared that power level erratas would no longer be a thing, which means they basically said, screw it, you can combo with Time Vault however you want, and they put the card back to its original wording, although they did restrict Time Vault in Vintage and ban it in Legacy. But to this day, the combo using Voltaic Key to untap Time Vault to take infinite turns is still one of the most powerful things you can do in Vintage, Magic's most powerful format, despite the fact that you're only allowed to play a single copy of Time Vault itself, which is a pretty clear sign that Vault Key is easily one of the most broken combos in the history of the game. Protein Hulk plus Flash. We just discussed how Wizard put an end to power level erratas in 2007, which is what finally freed Time Vault in Voltaic Key. But this wasn't the only broken combo that came from cards being played as written. The Mirage Rare Flash is pretty simple. For 2 mana instant speed, you can put a creature into play from your hand, and then if you don't pay its mana cost -2, which is the cost of Flash, then you have to sacrifice the creature. When it was printed, Flash was basically supposed to be a way that you could play a creature with, well, Flash, although this was way before Flash became a mechanic, and the mechanic was actually named after the card Flash. The problem is Wizards pretty quickly realized that this wording was super busted, so much like Time Vault, they did a power level errata to reword the card to drop its power level, with the errated wording basically saying that if you paid the creature's cost -2, the creature would go to the battlefield, but if you didn't play the creature's cost, it would just go directly to the graveyard without ever entering the battlefield at all, which is pretty weird, but whatever. Anyways, when Wizards dropped power level erratas in 2007, Flash reverted back to its super broken printed wording. Players almost immediately realized that Flash was super broken with Protein Hulk, a 7-drop that when it dies can tutor up any number of creatures with total mana value 6 or less. You could use Flash to put Hulk into play for just 2 mana, and then it would immediately die, but that's what you wanted Hulk to do anyway. When Protein Hulk died, you could tutor up a game-ending combo of creatures. There's a bunch of different loops that you could get, but the most popular and straightforward is that when Hulk died, you'd get Carrion Feeder with Karmic Guide. Karmic Guide reanimates Protein Hulk when it enters, and then Carrion Feeder can sack the Hulk, so you get another shot at its ability. This time you tutor up a Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker. Then you can tap the Kiki-Jiki to copy the Karmic Guide. But with this trigger on the stack, you sacrifice the Kiki-Jiki to Carrion Feeder, so when the trigger resolves, Karmic Guide can reanimate the hasty Kiki-Jiki. So you can do this again and again and again, giving you infinite hasty Karmic Guides to attack and win the game on the spot. All of this happened just before the Legacy GP Columbus in May of 2007, and heading into the event, pretty much everyone knew the event would be Flash Hulk versus Rogue decks specifically designed to try to beat the turn 2 kill combo deck. But in the end, all this brewing to try to beat Flash Hulk didn't really matter, because Flash Hulk won the event in the hands of Steve Sadin. Although by June, just a couple months later, Flash had been banned out of Legacy. But that's not the end of the Flash Hulk story. Protein Hulk itself had been banned in Commander more or less from the time it had first been printed, but for some reason in 2017, the old Commander RC decided they were going to unban Protein Hulk in the format. For casual Commander, this was pretty much fine, since most players weren't interested in trying to kill on turn 2 with the combo, but competitive Commander was another story. Flash Hulk quickly became the best way to win a game of CDH, which led to a couple of years of the community complaining, with CDH players saying that the combo needed to be banned, and the RC replying that they didn't ban cards for CDH, and that the ban list was exclusively for casual play. Finally, in April 2020, the RC gave in and banned Flash in Commander, while basically stating that the CDH community had used up their one time, and they still didn't plan to ban cards with CDH in mind. So not only is Flash Hulk one of the most broken combos in Magic's history, but it holds the honor of being the rare combo that broke 2 very different formats more than a decade apart. Painter's Servant with Grindstone. Painter Servant is one of the most unique cards in all of Magic. The 2-drop artifact Scarecrow lets you pick a color and then essentially just turns everything into that color. By itself, this doesn't really do anything, but with the help of the Tempest Rare Grindstone, Painter Servant became a devastatingly broken combo piece that still today, nearly 20 years after the combo was first printed, remains a top-tier strategy in Legacy, one of the game's most powerful formats. Grindstone is also a fairly unique card. The 1-mana artifact lets you pay 3 and mill the top 2 cards of target player's library, but if those cards share a color, you get to repeat the process. This means that with a Painter Servant on the battlefield, Grindstone will just mill your opponent's entire deck, which will let you win by milling out when your opponent draws for their turn with an empty library. Having Painter Servant as a key combo piece also opens up some other funny synergies that no other deck really gets to play. For example, most Painter Servant Grindstone decks choose blue as their color with Painter Servant, which lets them play a bunch of narrow cards like Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast, but cards that become super busted once everything is blue, meaning they can counter any spell or blow up any permanent for just a single mana, assuming Painter Servant's on the battlefield. The synergy is so strong that it even shows up in some vintage decks, which is more than enough to make Painter Servant with Grindstone one of the most broken combos in the game's history. Splinter Twin with Deceiver Exarch or Pesterbite. Nothing says peak Modern like Splinter Twin. Back in the mid-2010s, Modern was booming, and at the top of the meta sat Twin. The idea of the combo control deck was pretty simple. Get a creature that has an Enters ability that can untap itself on the battlefield, like Deceiver Exarch or Pesterbite, and then enchant that creature with Splinter Twin, an aura that lets you tap the enchanted creature to make a copy of it. This would let you tap your Deceiver Exarch to make a hasty token copy of Deceiver Exarch, and you could use this new token copy to untap the original that's wearing the Splinter Twin, so then you could tap the original again to make another hasty token copy, repeat this process a few hundred or million times, and you have this infinitely large board of hasty 1/4s to win you the game. While the combo was undoubtedly strong, and Twin was a top-tier Modern deck for most of its life, Wizards banning Splinter Twin in 2016, right before the release of Oath of the Gatewatch, caught many players by surprise and led to an outpouring of anger from the community, many of whom didn't think that the iconic enchantment really deserved to be banned. This banning lasted until 2024 when Wizards finally freed Twin, although sadly it hasn't regained its top-tier status thanks to how much the Modern format has increased in power over the past decade. Hilariously, right after banning Splinter Twin in Modern, Wizards ended up printing a very similar combo into Standard. While we're not going to get into the combo today, Copycat Combo at least deserves an honorable mention. While perhaps not as iconic as Twin, the concept was the same. Play a Saheeli Rai, which can -2 to make a hasty token copy of a creature, and then play Felidar Guardian, a 1/4 that can blink a permanent when it enters. With this setup, you can use Saheeli to copy the Felidar Guardian, which enters and blinks the Saheeli so you can activate it again. Do this a few hundred times, make a bunch of hasty 1/4s, and baby, you got a stew going, and also infinite damage, with a few million hasty 1/4 attackers, which makes a combo win just like Splinter Twin. Well, Copycat Combo did see a bit of Modern play as a replacement for the recently banned Twin. It was especially brutal in Standard, where it only lasted about 6 months before it had to be banned. Isochron Scepter with Dramatic Reversal. Isochron Scepter is a pretty obviously breakable card. One of the foundational mechanics of Magic is that when you play an instant, it goes to your graveyard so you can't use it again. And Isochron Scepter lets you break this rule by imprinting an instant with mana value 2 or less on it, and letting you repeatedly cast it by tapping the Scepter and paying 2 mana. The only problem is that Isochron Scepter can only be activated once a turn, because you have to tap the artifact to activate it. But what if you imprint a card that untaps Scepter, like Dramatic Reversal onto Scepter? That's when things get especially broken. Dramatic Reversal lets you untap all your non-land permanents, which means if you can imprint it on the Scepter, you can pay 2 mana and untap everything, including the Isochron Scepter. If you add in some mana rocks like Soul Ring or Mana Vault or even a Hedron Archive, you can easily use the combo to generate infinite mana. All you need is to have at least 3 mana being produced by non-land sources, and you can tap all your stuff for mana, spend 2 of that mana to activate Scepter to cast a dramatic reversal, which will untap all your mana sources and your Scepter, and then generate infinite mana, since each time you go through the loop, you're making more mana than you're spending, at which point you should be able to figure out a way to win the game somehow. While the combo has never really taken off in 60 card formats, it is one of the most iconic and popular combos in Commander, where it naturally fits in many decks, since playing a bunch of mana rocks for ramp is pretty popular in Commander anyway, and considering how Commander is currently the most popular way to play Magic, this alone is more than enough to make Dramatic Reversal with Isochron Scepter one of the most broken combos in the game's history. Thassa's Oracle with Demonic Consultation. As Magic has evolved over the past 3 decades, so has the formats where the most broken combos see play. Over the last 10 years or so, Commander has become the most popular way to play Magic, so it's only fitting that we wrap things up with one of the most broken combos in competitive Commander, Thassa's Oracle with Demonic Consultation, or as it's popularly known, Thoracle. Thassa's Oracle is a pretty wild card. It calls back to Laboratory Maniac, the first card in Magic that would let you win the game rather than losing the game if you draw an empty library, but it's about 1,000,000 times better since it's an enters ability rather than a static one, which means even if your opponent can kill the Thassa's Oracle with your win the game trigger on the stack, you still get to win the game. The challenge of Thassa's Oracle is emptying your library as fast as possible, but this really isn't much of a challenge thanks to Demonic Consultation. The intended use of the 1 mana Ice Age uncommon is to be a weird tutor where you name a card, you exile a bunch of stuff from your deck, and eventually end up with that card in your hand. But if you choose to name a card that isn't in your deck, say you were already dead for example, you simply exile your entire deck all for just a single mana. If you add these two effects together, you've got a super fast combo kill. You play the Thassa's Oracle, and with its win the game trigger on the stack, you respond by casting Demonic Consultation to exile your entire the deck, which will win you the game on the spot. The end result is a broken combo that has become almost synonymous with CDH, and considering that the CDH community already used its one-time banning on Flash, this seems unlikely to change in the near future. So those are my picks for the most broken combos through the history of Magic the Gathering. Do you have some combos that should be on the list? Let me know in the comments, and if you're looking for even more Magic, check out the video about the most hated cards in the history of the game, or maybe the one about the deck that literally bored people to death on the Pro Tour.